Hello, my name is Calev Ben-Dor, editor of Fathom Journal. I'm very pleased to be joined, as always, by my co-editor, Omer-Jackaman, and Hanin Ghaddar from the Washington Institute. Hanin is the Friedman Senior Fellow in the Washington Institute's Linda and Tony Rubin program on Arab politics, where she focuses on Shia politics throughout the Levant. The longtime managing editor of Lebanon's Now news website, Hanin shed light on a broad range of cutting-edge issues, from the evolution of Hezbollah inside Lebanon's fractured political system to Iran's growing influence throughout the Middle East. She's also contributed to a number of US-based magazines and newspapers, including the New York Times and Foreign Policy. Hanin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
We were talking beforehand. The last time you joined us was in November 2023, which was a lifetime ago in the history of the Middle East. And we're recording this late May 2025. It's almost exactly 6 months since the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. And in that time, a number of relatively significant things have happened. A new Lebanese president was chosen, and municipal elections have also taken place, although I guess their significance is more questionable. Israel's continued to strike Hezbollah operatives both north and south of the Litani River. The Assad regime, after 5 long and brutal decades, that regime, a close ally of Hezbollah, has fallen, and the country is now ruled by former jihadi Ahmed al-Shara. Some have talked about Lebanon potentially joining the Abraham Accords. And obviously, there's a new administration in Washington. So how do these events kind of connect to one another and to the situation in Lebanon? What do you see as the main trends in this arena over the last half a year? And kind of what's their significance looking forward?
Thank you very much for having me. And yes, I agree. Since we last met, the Lebanon and Syria, at least I'm not going to say the whole of the Middle East, but at least Lebanon and Syria witnessed major changes, major shifts. Syria more than Lebanon, obviously. And the way we're looking at it today is that with the US removing the sanctions and waiving the sanctions, and also a completely new regime in Syria moving faster than Lebanon towards peace with Israel. Lebanon today is, after all this time, what we say in Lebanon, it's like the Lebanese government or the Lebanese people still need to do like a system upgrade, that things have changed, but they still haven't really believed it. It's like 40 years, more than 40 plus years of Hezbollah brainwashing the Shia community, building roots and alliances, terrorizing the Lebanese people and the Lebanese political circles. One cannot really expect a change overnight. However, one should expect a little bit more in terms of honoring international agreements. So this is where Lebanon is today. We see that we have what the war did. Let's say just like before we get to now. The success story, I think, of Israel was in Lebanon more than anything else. Gaza is a swamp. The region is still reeling from this, but we don't know what's going to happen with Iran, the deal. Lebanon is kind of a success story, although it's not like a complete success story. But it's a success story because the war in Lebanon actually targeted Hezbollah. It did not target major civilian populations. People were warned to leave before any strike on depots. And the numbers this time around compared to the last war with Israel, which was in 2006, the gap shifted in terms of like civilian deaths versus Hezbollah militant deaths. This time around, the focus was really on Hezbollah. And it worked in the sense that if you look at Hezbollah's main pillars of power in Lebanon, Most of them have been actually weakened, not necessarily 100% eliminated, and that's the problem, because we still have some of these powers have been weakened by the war, by Israelis' attacks, and also the international community's pressure, like especially the US. One is the military infrastructure. If we believe the number, if we trust, like the number that 80% of Hezbollah's military infrastructure has been demolished by Israel during this war, this is a major, major loss by Hezbollah. This is big because when Hezbollah loses their strategic weapons, they are exposed. And this is what happened today. The war reduced them from an army with strategic weapons, precision missiles weapons, weapons that have been set and produced and prepared for this war by the Iranians mostly, but also Hezbollah, for 40 years. And today, in a couple of months, they were demolished. This raises two questions. One, that Hezbollah, no matter how prepared they are, they just couldn't use their weapons. Their weapons were basically acting as an umbrella or like a shield, an insurance policy for Iran. This also means that Iran has lost its protective shield in Lebanon. It's lost its insurance policy. Second, the other pillar is their finances. They lost already a lot of money before the war because of the regional operations, less money coming from Iran, more money spent on Syria, Iraq, Yemen. And the war also not only targeted the Qadr al-Hassan offices, it actually targeted the silos, underground silos where they kept their money, the millions and millions of money that they owned. They also were demolished. And today they are struck for money. They are doing everything they can to make more money through illegal, smuggling, but they also lost Syria, and we'll talk about how isolated they are from the region today. The third pillar is their alliances. They lost their alliances, their political alliances before the war. They lost it after the 2019 protests, and when the next elections happened right before the war, the parliament, they lost their most of their allies. But today, if we look at how their allies have actually lost more support during the war, we can start to imagine how the next parliament is going to look like. We can delve into the details of the allies later. Last pillar of power they have in Lebanon is actually still there. They still have one strong asset that they want to keep no matter what, which is their Shia representation in politics, in the parliament. That's why we see them very much focused on this today. They are using all the narrative of the Islamists in Syria are coming, you need our arms. The Lebanese army is not capable, they're coming to expose you of your protection. Israel is occupying Lebanon, you need the resistance. All this narrative, everything they have is focused on maintaining their support base within the Shia community, but they lost all four. However, today we have a new president who is determined to implement the ceasefire agreement. We have a new prime minister who says he is committed, but we haven't really seen much yet. We have a new government that basically came from this current parliament where they have some allies and they have the Shia representation. So the government that we got is not really the government that Lebanon wants. We are looking forward to the next parliamentary elections as the major step for Lebanon, hoping that one, they lose some of their Shia representations, which is possible, difficult, but possible, and two, that all their allies will actually lose. And we see this happening when their main Christian ally, Gibran Bassil, the Aounists, lost significantly during the past municipal elections. So this is basically the problem that they are facing now. They're losing allies drastically. Their allies are dropping like flies politically, and their opponents, mainly the Lebanese forces, if you look at the recent municipal elections, their opponents, the Lebanese forces, have actually won. It was a wave of Lebanese forces winning municipal elections in Christian areas. There's no one left, really no one left. So it was some little significant results from municipal elections that would tell you how the next parliament might look like. And they're really worried because once they lose their political representation, they will lose everything. The question today is twofolded. Two main issues in Lebanon needs to be done in order for us to see that this Lebanon has actually moved on to go to the next step, which is border demarcation and peace with Israel, because the Lebanese actually want that. It's not like the Egyptians and the Syrians. It's not top down, it's actually bottom up. And two things need to be done. One is that the actual full implementation of the ceasefire agreement, meaning that disarming Hezbollah and the Palestinian factions, not only south of Litani, but all over Lebanon. And this requires a lot more from Lebanon today, a lot more from the Lebanese army, which is trying its best to avoid confrontation with Hezbollah. And I think confrontation with Hezbollah is inevitable if we really want to see a full implementation of the agreement. And two is to look at the next elections, parliamentary elections, are the major crossroads for Lebanon in terms of staying stuck in this mud that is Iran's occupation, or actually moving forward and joining the rest of the Arab states in terms of peace with Israel and normalization.
Thank you, Hanin. We're going to return to one of your later points there in a second, but just before I do, to pick up on something you said just now, which is the appetite for the ordinary Lebanese citizen for peace.
Yeah.
What are the metrics for that? How do we measure that?
I don't think you can actually measure
where does that confidence come from? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think you can measure it accurately because you need to like a very professional big survey in Lebanon that actually reach the Shia community. But you can tell through observations, right? Like talking to people on the ground. And the Shia community, I think, is much more, they will benefit more from peace with Israel, and they know it. And actually, a lot of them today are expressing privately that this, even if they still do not like Israel, and they still consider Israel as an enemy because of the recent war and because of the occupation of the 5 points, etc., whatever that is Hezbollah's narrative is still in their heads, they do understand one thing, that the only solution to end war is peace. They get it. And today, the talk about peace in Lebanon today is no longer a taboo. Before the war, if you talk and if you say the word peace with Israel, you're immediately looked at as an alien. Like, how dare you say something like that? After the war, today, it's part of the discussion. On TV programs, in the newspapers, on social media, everyone is talking about it, whether with or not, but people are no longer accused of being Mossad agents if they talk about peace with Israel as an option. It's a topic of actual discussion in the public. Third, if you want to talk about, like the Lebanese way, like sectarian divisions, the Christians don't mind it, obviously. The Shia want it more than anyone else, although they don't say it publicly, because they benefit more. Because if we don't have peace, then the war will continue, and they know what the war means now. It's not 2006. The war means it's like they're going to be living in a perpetual state of misery. And they know that peace will, one, end the war, and two, bring more benefits to the south of Lebanon, because the Shia are actually on the border, and they will benefit more from peace. The people who actually are more hesitant these days are not the Shia, are the Sunnis, because of Saudi Arabia's hesitation, because of Turkey, because of, like, in the collective literature, in the culture of Jerusalem, for example. Let's talk about Jerusalem and Palestine. It's actually more present historically in the Sunni historical text, the narrative, than the Shia. For the Shia, Jerusalem is not even present in their text. It's not there. The Shia, connection to the Palestinian cause came with Hezbollah and the PLO on the left. Historically, they don't mind. They didn't mind, and I think eventually they will. Once it happens, they will endorse it wholeheartedly. I think the only thing that is blocking the Shia from moving there is the fact that Hezbollah has arms. as long as Hezbollah has the arms, the Shia will not separate themselves from Hezbollah, because one, they will not see the alternative. They will not think about the alternative. They will not understand the alternative, which is a strong Lebanese state, which is not there, but also what it means to actually have peace with Israel, or at least stop the war with Israel. Once Hezbollah arms are confiscated and Hezbollah no longer an armed group, then they will be forced to think and see and understand the alternative, and they will get it.
Thank you, Hanin. That's fascinating. And it leads rather nicely on to the next question, which is something you touched on earlier. Only today, Lebanese Foreign Minister Youssef Raghi described Hezbollah as an armed organization operating outside the law, and he called on them to hand over their weapons, form a normal political party with their supporters, and let their fighters return to normal lives. It's a summary of his words. In a piece co-authored with Ehud Yaari, you recently wrote that the government's inclination at the moment is to seek to disarm Hezbollah through dialogue, but that you doubt this is possible. How do you see the government's current approach to Hezbollah then, as well as the chances to successfully disarm it? How do armed Palestinian groups within Lebanon play into this equation as well?
Yeah. So
and why did you laugh?
Yes. I think, like, no, Hezbollah fighters going back to a normal life is not something that they know how to do. I think, what is a normal life in Lebanon anyway? Normal life in Lebanon is not really, like, there's no normal life in Lebanon. This is why I laugh, because no one has a normal life. I think the whole Lebanon needs a serious upheaval in order for anyone to have a normal life. But the issue, let's go back to the issue of disarmament. The foreign minister, Raji, is right about Hezbollah. They have been reduced to gangs. They're no longer actually, an army or an organized group. They have gangs with no leadership, only like ground leadership with some guidance from Iran and some guidance from whoever is still there. But they lack leadership. They are like community gangs now. Like they react, they don't act. But this is not the main. This public statement is not very common in Lebanon in terms of like government officials. Raji is one of the very few people who actually are talking to this, because he's Lebanese forces and they've always been saying this. And today they are empowered by the municipal elections results, and they feel much more empowered that they are like the #1 Christian power on the street. But the issue of disarmament is really a serious issue. The Lebanese unwillingness to confront Hezbollah is going to lead to disasters, because Hezbollah, you cannot have a dialogue with Hezbollah. When the president announced that he's going to have a dialogue with Hezbollah, the next day, both Naim Assem, the new Secretary General, and Wafiq Safa, the internal security official, both responded publicly saying, we're not doing this dialogue to discuss disarmament. We're only doing this dialogue in order to discuss a national strategy, defense strategy, which was a big blow to the Lebanese president. But he still went for it, because he doesn't want confrontation. The army do not want confrontation. The government doesn't want confrontation. No one and no official in Lebanon wants to do confrontation. And this is an issue, because if you really want to disarm Hezbollah, you cannot avoid confrontation, because they will not give up. They will never give up their arms. They know what it means for them to give up their arms, because they cannot transform into a political party. They fail as a political party. They have zero political vision. And we all know that. The fact that that Lebanon is not confronting Hezbollah and really disarming them by force means that Lebanon is not serious about actually disarming Hezbollah. And the same goes for the Palestinian camps. You talked about Abbas visit and the Palestinian camps. Yes, we wrote about it. And it cannot be separate from disarming Hezbollah. And the fact that they are talking about disarming the Lebanese, the Palestinian camps, factions in Lebanon, and totally ignoring the whole Hezbollah disarmament, it means that they are actually distracting the public and the international community from the major issue. Because honestly, what is the main danger in Lebanon today? It's Hezbollah's arms. The Palestinian factions will disarm when Hezbollah disarms, but this is their way of avoiding the elephant in the room and making sure that the Lebanese feel that the army is doing something and the international community sees some results. But eventually, I really don't believe that Lebanon is serious about disarmament, and they are just focusing on south of Litani and trying their best to, play the time game in the rest of Lebanon, hoping that the international pressure does not increase and somehow the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon fizzles down like it did in 2006. And they're waiting for the negotiations with the Iranians, between the US and the Iranians, which is, I think, wrong because these two topics are not related, but they feel if the US and Iran reaches a deal, it will reflect on Lebanon in a way that Hezbollah will be empowered and they will not be able to disarm them. And Israel will be pressured to stop bombing Hezbollah in Lebanon. And hey, we go back to the 2006 scenario, and Trump will tell Netanyahu that I don't want you to do anything in Lebanon anymore. We have a deal with Iran, everything will be great. I think this is, for the Americans and for the Israelis, these two things are separate, but the Lebanese have this illusion that the two files are linked and that they shouldn't do anything before the results of the negotiations come up.
And then can you, just as you brought it up, can you speak to the, we've had, I guess, 5 rounds now of talks, negotiations between the Trump administration and Iran. The administration, on the one hand, seems to be saying no enrichment whatsoever. Iran says that's a red line. There was a stage when Witkoff said maybe yes enrichment, and Rubio said no enrichment. We know Trump is keen generally on deals.
Yes.
We know Iran is relatively weak. They also don't seem to have any defense system at the moment. I always think about Witkoff, that he's basically been given the 3 most humongous projects: the Russia-Ukraine on the one hand, Israel-Hamas on the other, and now America-Iran, all of which require huge amounts of knowledge and sophistication. And he's got all 3 of those, but they're 5 rounds in. How do you imagine this going?
Let me say that I don't think we have enough information. Like, the administration is not like really briefing anyone about this. They're not giving us the details. It's one of those deals that are negotiated, and suddenly we will know that there's an agreement. And it's obvious that Trump wants the deal. He's really pushing for the deal, and the Iranians know that. When the Iranians know and understand that the Americans really want a deal, they will try to, this is good for them in the negotiations. So they're going to try as much as they can in order to push for what they want, hoping that the desire for a deal is stronger than the desire for a good deal. So I think the Iranians are taking advantage of this desire for the deal in order to, keep, the level they want. But I'm not sure what this deal means also for the region, because if we see lift of sanctions in general, which is not going to be like magic wand that would lift sanctions, like there's a lot of preparation for it, but then the Iranian regime will be empowered, the opposition will be weakened, Iran's proxies in the region, we don't know if they are part of the deal, of the negotiations or not. Are they or not? Some people say they are, some people say they aren't. So it's not just about the nuclear program. It's also about Hezbollah, the Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis. It's like, what does this deal mean to any of us in the region? We don't know. So there's a lot of concern. There's a lot of concern in the region, but there's also concern everywhere that if it is a deal that is going to empower Iran and its proxies in the region, then it's not going to be a good deal. We hope that at least it's going to be strong on the nuclear file in terms of enrichment, And in terms of the access of the nuclear what is it called, the IAEA, apparently we've seen this before, and they say they are welcome to come and check, and they never do, and they hide stuff. The Iranians are very good at this, like they never commit to a deal, and this is the problem. We don't have the info until we do.
Thank you, Hanin. Let's stay with Iran for the moment. Hezbollah was previously thought. It was previously believed that Hezbollah was considered by the Iranians as the crown jewel in the Ring of Fire strategy.
Yeah.
Is it still thought of that way? I mean, what's Tehran's thinking about Hezbollah at the moment? Are they seeking to double down on Hezbollah with the fall of Assad? How does that factor in? Might they focus elsewhere in the region?
They are focusing elsewhere in the region already. The Houthis is a good example. They say they are distancing themselves, but Houthis proved themselves to be this time around more successful than Hezbollah, more durable than Hezbollah. They managed to survive everything, and they can still do what they want. I think what happened with the Iranian Hezbollah dynamics today is that Hezbollah was the success story, but it was very much linked as a success story to Hassan Nasrallah himself. It was Imad Maghniye, Mustafa Badreddin, Fuad Shukr, and Ali Karaki. These were the four main founders of Hezbollah, right? Hassan Nasrallah came later. He wasn't a founder, but he came later, and he became associated with Hezbollah. So for the Iranians, these 5 people were actually Hezbollah. And now they're all gone. Imad Maghniye was gone before, but the rest, this war eliminated the rest of them. The other commanders are still there, maybe like 4th or 5th year commanders are still there. They can be trained and upgraded and, pushed to the front at one point, and it will happen. They can rebuild their command structure. However, the actual Hezbollah is gone with the death of all these people. The founders who understand the ideology and the politics and the military at the same time, because the others have one specialty rather than another, but the founders actually do understand the link between all that. They're all gone. So with this being said, Hezbollah, don't forget that Hezbollah, because they were a success story, they became the Quds force after Soleimani's assassination in Iraq. When Soleimani was killed by the Americans, the new guy who replaced him, Qani, was not really the commander of the Quds force in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. It was Hezbollah because of the language barrier, the culture barrier. He did not really fill the shoes. So the actual on-the-ground commanders of the Quds force were Hezbollah. They have become regional with Qasem Soleimani, and they became a regional proxy. They were never just Lebanese proxies. Since Syria, they have become a regional proxy, and they have lost this role today. Not only they have lost their regional role, for Iran, they have been reduced to Lebanon, back to Lebanon. So they have lost more than their aura as the success story with Hassan Nasrallah and all, but they have lost their regional role. And add to that, they have been isolated by Syria. They're hoping to continue find routes in order to smuggle, because don't forget that Syria is really not secure 100%, all of it. There's always smuggling routes, but they have lost Syria. They have been isolated in Lebanon, strapped from their status in the region, strapped from their status in Lebanon, lost everything that they took proud of, and Iran lost its insurance policy in Lebanon and in the region as well. So if I were Iran today, if I want to think like Iran today, after 40 years of investment, serious investment in Hezbollah and their precision weapons and their strategic missiles and everything, training, people, salaries, benefits, they had spent so much money on this party. When then suddenly, in a few weeks, it was all gone, or at least 80% of it is gone. Do I want to make the same investment again? That's a big question. I don't know if they have the answer. If they have the answer, we would have seen it. But I think if the deal with the Americans go well, at least if they manage to get some of their money back, if some of the sanctions were lifted and they started making money, then they will have some money to spare in order to rebuild Hezbollah. But if they don't have the money to spare, this is the main question. Is it worth the investment? I'm not sure that for the Iranians, this is worth the investment because they failed drastically. They made major decisions, major mistakes in their decisions. The whole support Gaza, Harb al-Isnad was a big, bad decision. Everything they did in this war was huge mistakes. So I would reconsider if I were Iran. And I'm sure there's a rift within the Iranian regime today about this, the internal discussions within the IRGC and the Iranian regime itself, not the rift between the IRGC and the regime, the rift among the ranks internally this is one of the main discussions, and we will know sooner or later.
Thanks, Hanin. Just one kind of last set of questions. I'm intrigued domestically how the fall of Assad kind of affects domestic Lebanese politics, and also we talked earlier about peace in Israel, etc. So, just from your perspective, obviously, Israel have. It's interesting because for years Israel would hit Hezbollah operatives in Syria. They wouldn't touch them in Lebanon. There really was. Israelis talked about deterrence, but there was absolutely this mutual deterrence.
Yes.
And I've actually been a bit surprised, even after the ceasefire, that Israel has really been going after Hezbollah fighters, north, south. So
Today,
I know, right. So I know that the government often kind of critiques it, but is your reading, to what extent does the government care about that sort of thing? We talked about Lebanese and the potential peace, and again we should point out there aren't really, it's not like Egypt and Syria of territorial disputes or anything. I mean, there's history, but there's no territorial disputes. What needs to be done? I mean, you kind of touched on this. Are they waiting for Saudi Arabia? What needs to be done in order to push some sort of normalization type thing forward between Israel and Lebanon?
Sure. All right. So the fall of Assad, it has different repercussions. So now we can talk about border demarcation with Syria. Syria still has, if the Saudi initiative of border demarcation between the two countries succeed, it means that we are on the way of actually separating Lebanon from Syria, because until today, as Syria hasn't really acknowledged Lebanon, even with the new government, Syria hasn't acknowledged Lebanon as an independent country. They need to acknowledge Lebanon as an independent country and then do border demarcation. And then the Shibah farms will be resolved, because don't forget, it's not just border demarcation on that side. With the Shibah farm, it's a big issue that Syria has to resolve. Syria needs to say that Shibah farms are Syrian. And then Lebanon will be freed from this, monster hovering over its head. So this is one repercussion, the border demarcation and the Shibah farms, which still needs to be resolved. Another thing is, of course, for Hezbollah, they lost an ally in Syria. Hezbollah is isolated. The third is that Syria's allies in Lebanon, which were also Hezbollah's allies in Lebanon, also lost, because without Syria, without having, the backbone of the Syrian regime, they cannot really continue to have the support that they have. And also Hezbollah means also that Hezbollah will lose the allies of the Syrian regime in Lebanon. However, there are two other things that are not really spoken about, which is the refugees and the cash coming from Syria. And these are two big things. And of course, the Captagon trade, which is now no longer in Syria, but Hezbollah is trying to, do some stuff in Lebanon, hoping to smuggle them through Syria. This is something to keep an eye on. It's not big yet, but it's there. The refugees, if they cannot go back to their homes, they are still in Lebanon. And now there's a big discussion in Lebanon, is that when will the refugees go back to Syria? A lot of them have settled in Lebanon, are getting assistance from international organizations, and if they go back to Syria, Syria is not ready for them yet. Their homes haven't been rebuilt, and the Syrian government, maybe now they're on their feet after the sanctions relief, they can actually start, the economy can kick off, but it will take time. So these Syrians, if they go back to Syria, they will be on the street with no prospect. So they're staying in Lebanon, and that's an issue. It's not just Lebanon. This is also Jordan and Turkey. But eventually, this is something that needs to be resolved. The third thing is that when the Assad regime collapsed, a lot of these people, regime people, came to Lebanon. Remember, there were like news about Syrian regime people fleeing because they cannot flee through the airport. The regime fell, the airport fell. So a lot of them came to Lebanon. Most of them actually came to Lebanon from the Alawite coast, from Syria, from Damascus, from other places, with bags of cash, right? Some of them left through the airport to other countries, and some of them stayed in Lebanon. A lot of this cash has been, circulated in Lebanon, and some would say actually in Lebanon, a friend of mine who actually wrote about this said that they have been circulating in like a new system, which is like a digital economy, kind of like new financial firms that are laundering this money through digital wallets and loans and to Hezbollah and co. And it's kind of, like the Syrian cash have temporarily replaced the Iranian cash in Lebanon. And a lot of this money is being laundered in Lebanon and a lot of the, like the underground economy is benefiting from it, including Hezbollah. And we're talking about billions here. We're talking about a lot of, USD cash. So this is something to keep an eye on. Eventually, when it comes to the peace prospect, there's always this, because the two countries are that related historically, if Syria goes to join the Abraham Accords, peace, normalization, etc., everyone in Lebanon is starting to think today, if Syria is going in that direction, are we like the last people to do this? Because there's serious fear in Lebanon now. If Syria goes this way and Lebanon still refuses to move from the gray zone that we are stuck in to a new phase where we in Syria and others will actually be done with war, do the peace and be done with it, and actually move on. A lot of Lebanon feel that we should have been first. That's the feeling that I sense from the Lebanese, is that why Syria, like it doesn't make sense to them. The problem is that in Lebanon, to do this, it can be done, but you can start at least with the simple things, right? You can start with the first step towards normalization, which is the decriminalization of communications. According to the law, a Lebanese and an Israeli cannot communicate. Once you stop this, once you pass a new law that does not criminalize, remove the criminalization aspect of this law, then this is the first step towards peace, because then the Lebanese and Israelis can actually meet and talk publicly, which will change hugely the perspective on the ground. And then, of course, you can do the armistice agreement, the border demarcation, or just go to peace right away, like the way Syria is doing. But if the Lebanon, the official Lebanon is still saying that Lebanon is not ready for peace, Lebanon is not ready for peace, Israel is still occupying certain areas in Lebanon, Israel is still bombing Lebanon, okay, but let's start somewhere. Maybe Lebanon, I don't agree, but let's say they're right, that Lebanon is not ready for peace. Then let's start somewhere small, and then we move on until Lebanon. So decriminalization, border demarcation, armistice, etc., and then we can get there when we're ready. But it's you can't just say we're not ready and sit back. You have to do something. And I think this is the main. This should be the main plan of Lebanon: a strategy of 4 main steps to get to peace.
Hanin, as always, speaking to you is hugely informative and educational for me, and I'm sure it will be for everybody watching as well. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure.